we have a lot of huge problems. We have the nuclear problem in Korea. We have the nuclear problem in Iran. We have, of course, the whole array of problems, each of which, Afghanistan, and so forth. But then we have the financial issues. But they really are issues of the construction of a new world order. That's what this is about.
What is our common bond truly? Freedom!
It's amazing how the media really can draw one's attention to something, and they're very good at it. They, all of America, I mean, the highest TV ratings ever probably will come through with this trial, even bigger than the Jodi Arias trial, is this Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman trial. And there's a lot of scuttlebutt on there. There's a lot of back and forth, and it's just terrible. Again, divisive tactics. You know, they're trying to defend the indefensible. Our education system, unfortunately, has been taken over. This came out in congressional reports. Although the Congressional Committee to investigate the tax-exempt foundations was squashed in 1954, they did have hearings to find out where and all the money that the philanthropist organizations, what they're doing and what they're doing with this money, and is there any subversive elements, you know, that would be against the principles of the United States, which is life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, etc., so forth and so on. Here's an excerpt from the actual 1953 investigation into the tax-exempt foundation's congressional transcript. The NEA and PEA propagandize for socialism. The National Education Association and the Progressive Education Association have received major contributions from the General Education Board, one of the foundations dispersing Rockefeller tax-exempt money. The National Education Association and Progressive Education Association are very important because through them the foundations are reaching right into the public schools and are affecting millions of school children. By 1947, some $8 million was spent by the General Education Board on new educational goals and procedures, and among others, the National Education Association and Progressive Education Association were generously supported in educational reorganization and experimentation. During the 1930s, these two educational organizations received particularly large sums of money. And by 1940, the National Education Association received a total of $456,100, and the Progressive Education Association a total of $1,635,941. Just what kind of educational reorganization and experimentation was supported by the tax-exempt funds of the General Education Board? The Progressive Education Association, in its official magazine, called Progressive Education on page 257 of the November 1947 issue, had a lead article by John J. DeBauer, president of the American Education Fellowship. The American Education Fellowship is the present name of the PEA. DeBauer has extensive Communist Front affiliations. The ideology of the National Education Association was stated in 1934 by Willard E. Givens, who at the time was superintendent of schools at Oakland, California, and subsequently became executive secretary of the NEA, a post which he held for 18 years, under the title Education for a New America. In the proceedings of the 72nd annual meeting of the NEA, Givens said in 1934, "This report comes directly from the thinking together of more than 1,000 members of the Department of Superintendents," that's school superintendents. "A dying laissez-faire must be completely destroyed, and all of us, including the owners, must be subjected to a large amount of social control." A large section of our discussion group, accepting the conclusions of distinguished students, maintaining that in our fragile, interdependent, there's that word again, interdependent society, The credit agencies, the basic industries, and the utilities cannot be centrally planned and operated under private ownership. Hence, they will join in creating a swift nationwide campaign of adult education, which will support President Roosevelt in taking these over and operating them at full capacity as a unified national system in the interests of all the people. Is this an educational program, or is it propaganda in favor of socialism? And why should the General Education Board, whose funds came from Rockefeller, who made his money under the free enterprise system, support such propaganda? Because in essence, it came out through these reports that the Ford Foundation had admitted to, on record, Gaither admitted to Norman Dodd that the intention, now as far-fetched as this sounds, it sounds even more far-fetched probably in 1953 or 54, was to merge the United States with the Soviet Union. Now, again, this goes back to the Rhodes Scholarships, the secret society of perpetrating a fraud and a controlled manipulation of the world, basically under British rule, is really what it comes down to. That this is all documented in Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley, a large work, tedious to read, but every American should read it and understand the enemy. You need to know your enemy to fight it. And it leads us to this whole idea of the fact that they've been moving the elite, these elite circles, these Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Club of Rome, have been working diligently to depopulate, deindustrialize the world to the best efforts that they can. Limits to growth, the zero growth agenda of the Club of Rome is to basically destroy manufacturing and output in the United States, as they've done since 1969, when the zero growth report came out, and limits to growth, and that's the agenda. So the reason why manufacturing has left the United States is because these elitists have decided that that's what they're going to do. And they get their little puppets to get into the government, and they infiltrate them in regulatory bodies, and they've been doing this for 100 years. So you can understand how they get their people in. They get their person in, and he brings somebody in on a lower level, and over time they've gotten into every aspect of our government, especially the State Department, which is the reason why we have the troubles we have in the Middle East, and we're giving Al-Qaeda weapons to fight the dictator Assad and take him out. Now, when you look at all these countries, Assad's Syria, and you look at Gaddafi in Libya, and Mubarak, he was the Egypt guy. All these puppets at one time were in the back pocket of the United States government. We propped them up as well as like we're propping up these rebels. Now keep this in mind, because they did this in the 50s, and taking over everything of the Operation Ajax and all these things that are occulted and not taught. Even if you get a history show, a show upon history. Yesterday there was one of these documentaries on television talking about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and they get into this whole thing about his they couldn't understand how he could, he was a loner type and all this other stuff, and they negated the fact that the most important fact is that not that he decided to drop out and move into a cabin in the woods with no electricity or anything like that, and then start sending bombs and blowing people up, was that he was a willing volunteer for MKUltra at Harvard in 1965. Just left that out.
MKUltra program was actually a CIA covert operation within the United States, where unwitting suspects were made guinea pigs in research about psychotropic drugs, various kinds of psychological pressure. I think there's pretty clear evidence that MKUltra was a program at Harvard. Ted was in a psychological research study run by a psychologist by the name of Henry Murray.
Murray conducted abusive experiments at Harvard under the supervision of Sidney Gottlieb, MKUltra director.
And they were actually trying to study how alienated youth, and Ted was identified as an alienated youth at Harvard, would respond to having their philosophy of life and their values challenged.
The Murray-Gottlieb MKUltra objective: behavior modification by covert means, through drugs, hypnosis, and torture.
So for 3 years, beginning at the age of 17, Ted was in this study. I've read some of the transcripts, and they were pretty awful. I mean, they included personal attacks. So as my brother's trying to make some kind of philosophical point, his adversary in this debate is making disparaging comments about his appearance, about his maturity.
Of course, MKUltra came out in the government, in the reports, in 1977, Frank Church reports. And this is what's happened to America. We've been manipulated to believe their lies and conditioned through COINTELPRO to think that anybody that's speaking the truth is a crazy lunatic. But we will persevere, and we will wake the American people up, because the things that we say, more and more, the things that people such as myself are amplifying, are resonating, and more people are understanding. And they're starting to understand that they have to take a stake in their lives, not depend on the government. They want to divide the races. They want to divide the people, attacking religion, forcing insurance on people. And then you're a racist if you don't agree with their program. They have it. It's a beautiful, beautiful spin doctors working for them, the top notch. And I find it so outrageous, like Al Sharpton, the Tawana Brawley case. Everyone forgets about Tawana Brawley, the lies they did, that they put feces on her and found her on the side of the road. The whole story was fabricated.
Tawana Brawley is a 16-year-old girl whose story is the talk of New York these days.
The New York State teenager who claims that she was abducted and raped by 6 white men.
She had KKK written across her chest and nigger across her stomach,
leading to widespread outrage.
We're going to expose the facts in these crimes that you do against black people.
I bet you do, Al.
There's absolutely no way that this served any good social purpose. If you concoct a rape, then you undermine the credibility of women who are raped. If you concoct a rape and turn it into a race crime, then you undermine true victims of race crimes.
About 6 months after the hoax was unmasked, Brawley's former boyfriend told Newsday that Tawana had invented the scheme, apparently to avoid a beating by her mother's boyfriend after running away from home.
Welcome to Politics Nation. I'm Al Sharpton.
One would think if he sold you such a terrible bill of goods on such a giant story that dominated news cycles for such a long period of time and proved to be a total hoax, that you might not show up at his next press conference with your camera crew. He has managed to transcend it magically.
The COINTELPRO, these people are government agents. They work, and their careers. Why do you think these people have these long careers in the media? So you get to know who they are. You get to love them, like the worst traitor of all. And is the man that America trusted the most, Walter Cronkite.
We Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill. It would take a lot of courage, a lot of faith, a lot of persuasion to them to come along with us on this necessity.
Walter Cronkite, a total proponent for world government and giving up the sovereignty of the United States, a traitor to our nation. And we herald him as a hero. This is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Hard to believe or not, it's the truth. It's what they're not telling you. And I need you to share this information. First of all, research everything I say. Don't believe a word of it. Till you find your own truth. There's only one truth. Seek it and you'll find it.